Welcome to another episode of the Breakthrough Autism podcast. We have a serious problem within autism services. We can't seem to find enough staff nor to keep staff. That's why I'm so excited to talk with Ambreen today, a board certified assistant behavior analyst who has been in the field for a remarkable 6 years, and share her journey of how she got there to why she stays in the field. Welcome, Ambreen.
Thanks, Nancy.
It's great to have you here.
It's great to be here.
So, you started within data analysis,
Yes.
totally different field,
Yes.
and sort of fell into really ABA, applied behavior analysis, and working with kids with autism.
Yes.
Kind of similar to my journey, too. I was working in a very different industry with kids, albeit in psychology, studying in school, and then sort of found my way, fell into ABA, and fell in love with it. You were also tutoring too at the
Yes.
same time. So tell me about how did you go from data analysis, some tutoring on the side, to ABA and working with kids with autism?
I've always had a passion of working with kids. Initially, I wanted to be a teacher, but somehow I just decided that wasn't for me. And then after university, I kind of did data entry, became a supervisor there. It was an okay job, but I still wanted to work with kids, so I started tutoring on the side. And then one day, I just saw this posting for Breakthrough Autism, and I applied, and I was like, "This would be ideal. Like, this is what I want to do." And I got the call, and I started off as an instructor therapist at Breakthrough and kind of worked my way up. I've done a lot of roles at Breakthrough, and now I'm a clinical coordinator, board certified assistant behavior analyst, and I love my job.
Amazing. You definitely worked your way up. You worked really
Yes.
hard, which is amazing. And it really shows like your journey, and we'll talk more about it, really shows people that hard work pays off. But you mentioned so you see this ad, right? And like you say, this is for me. I know this is it.
Yeah.
How did you know? What was it that spoke to you?
Um, there were words that like caught my eye, like meaningful career, working with kids with autism, making a difference. All those things are the values that I have, and I thought this would be a really great job for me and to make it my career, not just a job, like something
Yeah.
that I would do for years to come. So yeah,
Awesome.
yeah,
That's so great. So it's interesting that you say that because, yes, we at times within a field as a whole, I've heard from a lot of my colleagues and from parents, other professionals, that there's this issue with getting enough staff
yeah.
to do this meaningful work. This was a couple years back, but Forbes magazine actually came out with their top 10 most meaningful jobs ever. And there was a bunch of stuff on there, medical profession, jobs that people would know more of, more commonly known jobs. And at the same time, behavior analysis made the list, right? So being recognized on that type of international forum as something that is meaningful for people to do. Yet at the same time, we have people who, we don't have enough people. And that could also be because there's a growing need.
Mhm.
And we're looking for people like you, more and more people to enter into the profession. Even myself, I entered in as entry level and worked my way up. So you've got this job posting, you see it, you say, yes, this is for me. You get the job. Of course you did because you're fabulous. And I always say that we look for people not only with technical skills. To me personally,
Yeah.
is really secondary to the heart, the willingness to learn, the ability to learn, the persistence, the passion, right? Those are all like softer skills
Yeah.
I think it's difficult to teach somebody. You've got to come in with those things,
Mhm.
right? So you come in as an instructor, and you're working with a variety of different kids. What hooked you in at that stage?
Um, every day you go home and you know you made a difference, whether it's like a small difference in the client's life or even just staff's lives, you make a difference. And parents, just talking to them and hearing them, it's very rewarding to like hear them and them being appreciative of the services that we provide. It's really rewarding. I made a poster in my room where I have like little thank you notes from staff or parents, and it's a reminder why I'm in this field.
Amazing. Is there any ones that stick out to you? Any moments, any notes or anything that you've said, oh, like I have my days where I get something like that, and I'm like, "Ooh, I really needed that." That's gonna keep me
Yeah.
going for the next year. Anything for you?
I had a family that was having a really hard time with one of their kids, and so they started services. And I remember they sent me an email over the Christmas break saying they accomplished playing with a friend. And I know for most people that's not anything, but for us, because we work with these kids and these are skills that we work on, it was such a good feeling because that kid now plays with other kids, and this was something that they never did before.
Amazing. Huge,
Mhm.
huge. For people that may be watching that don't
Yeah.
know, one of the main challenges for individuals on the spectrum that leads to diagnosis is this category called social communication. And within there, one of the things that is notable is challenges around developing friendships, right? So that is huge to get a
Mhm.
note like that.
Yeah.
And it's important for people to know that even if kids start out that way, that's not where they
Yeah.
need to end up,
Mhm.
right? That things like ABA can really switch the developmental trajectory.
Yeah.
So that's beautiful. And related to that, it's those core, non-academic
Yeah.
skills, friendships, self-care that can be game changers,
Mhm.
right? In kids' lives. So that's awesome. So here you are, you're teaching some of those skills. Any days that stick out to you when you were first starting out, working through anything with any clients that you said, okay, I've gotten some good feedback from families.
Yeah.
Amazing. What about things that you were doing directly with the kids?
When I first started, there was a client who sat on my lap pretty much the entire session and was touching my face, my eyes, nose, mouth. And this is a client that didn't speak. And I remember I was doing eyes, nose, and mouth. And he said his first word that I heard, and it
Mhm.
was nose. And that's something that I remember. Yeah.
Amazing.
And we started
Amazing.
counting, we started mouthing letters, which is really big for him and his family.
So what in that moment, or even after you're driving home, whatever, you go home, what was going through your mind? What were your thoughts about, what does this mean for this child, for you?
For the child, it just opens up a whole new way of communicating. The client was using PECs, but this was like another way that they could communicate and kind of advocate for what they need, ask for things they want. For me, it was a big success because this wasn't a target in the client's treatment plan, but it was just something that I was just doing with them. And I felt good that I was able to like encourage them to like say their first word.
Amazing. Yeah. And it's that whole, which we're big on,
Yeah,
naturalistic teaching, right?
exactly.
Like,
Yeah.
not everything has to be, that's important too,
Yeah.
prescribed, right, and
Mhm.
planned. But there are moments and opportunities in everyday life to
Yeah.
capture, and you captured some of that.
Mhm.
And as a result, got some more communication going. You mentioned PECs.
Yes.
Some people might not know what that is. So, for people that may be watching, or maybe for some families, because we are fortunate enough to work with some kids who because of the direct result of treatment, whether that be ABA, sometimes that's with speech and language as well, or speech and language, or we collaborate with other professionals as well, who may be non-vocal and go on to vocalize. Amazing. This is an amazing outcome. It doesn't happen with
Yeah.
all of the kids we
Mhm.
work with. We know that.
Yeah.
But what we do strive to do is make sure that they have a means to
Mhm.
communicate no matter what. This is
Mhm.
huge. Functional communication is a game changer.
Yeah.
It is a basic need for kids on the spectrum to be able to do, whether that's vocal or not.
Yeah.
So, PECS is one of those ways,
Yeah.
especially for kids who are non vocal, but even if they might vocalize a little bit, maybe not enough, or whatever that might be. So, can you tell us what is PECS?
It's a communicative system that uses pictures to help the learner communicate their needs. So we usually start with asking for things that they want.
Mhm.
So we usually start very brief. They just hand over a picture and to the partner they're speaking with, and they get the item. And then it expands. We put two pictures. They are able to discriminate, get the item that they want. And it's a very complex system that is supposed to foster language. And it does foster language. We see it with a lot of our clients.
Amazing,
Yeah.
amazing. So we go from, even though it's a complex system, picture exchange communication system, technically, for
Yes.
those that want to know what it stands for. It's incredible how we can take it into small steps and be able to teach things that
Yeah.
way as well, right? And that the kids pick it up. For the kids in their experience, whether it's children, youth, or I've seen adults also
Yeah.
pick this up too,
Mhm.
regardless of, what we have to plan in the background. We're all
Yeah.
systematic. We have the
Oh, yes.
manual. We follow it. Phase one, phase super
Mhm.
duper important. Some kids graduate onto electronic devices too. I know we'll talk about
Yeah.
that. You have some experience with that. But from the child's perspective, right? Kids pick it up.
Yeah.
It's remarkable. They don't
Mhm.
they don't experience it as this like complex system. They experience it as just this is my voice,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
So tell us about any experiences you may have had with that. Have you had kids who've used pictures to communicate and, have they gotten through all of that?
So I had a client that recently started services and we started with PECs. And we were just teaching things that they would want. And just from the top of the binder, they would just pull that picture and hand it to the other person. But this kid was able to go through their binder, pick two PECs, and give it to their mom, which the mom was thrilled about. And
Mhm.
it's not something that we specifically taught, but they were able to do it. So then we have to change our teaching because we're like, oh, they're able to do that. So then we move through the phases a little bit faster.
Amazing.
Yeah.
It's amazing also. So like your experience was not only the result of the direct teaching, so this child is learning communication
Yeah.
skills because we've directly taught
Mhm.
stuff, but also now what you get is some just spontaneous language,
Yeah.
spontaneous learning,
Hmm.
which when you get that, you're really onto
Yeah.
something, right?
For
Again,
sure.
game changer, because
Hmm.
not every child is going to be able to
Yeah.
vocalize. And in fact, those that may vocalize in the future, we know also that PECS, if anything, helps with that,
Exactly. Yeah.
right? Have you
Hmm.
ever had any kids who maybe have started on devices or pictures and that start to vocalize? Well, you've given your
Yes.
example about the child who knows, but any other examples that you may have?
I have so many. But one that sticks out to me was a client that communicated with the device when I first started working with him. And if you hear him now, he talks a lot and he's very vocal. And we're working on now teaching him how to use a appropriate tone. So that's how
Amazing.
much we've progressed with him.
Amazing.
Yeah.
I think it's super important for anybody that might be watching,
Yeah.
professionals, and also especially parents to hear that even if their child needs an augmentative
Yeah.
alternative communication device or AAC, sometimes we call it, that doesn't mean that there's no chance that they'll vocalize,
Yeah.
right? Like
Hmm.
we don't know.
Yeah.
Sometimes it happens, sometimes it doesn't. But if anything, what we do know is that the pictures or the iPad or whatever you know um path we choose for this child, that if anything it's going to help boost it. It's
Yeah.
like boosting the car, right? Getting the car
Exactly.
started.
Yeah.
So it increases the chances. You've had firsthand experience so much so that now you're working on the little like subtle
Yeah.
nuances of
Hmm.
language. To work on tone is
Yeah.
huge. That means that child's come up in a tremendous long way.
Yeah.
So, like, related to that experience, just for people to have an idea, obviously every child is different, but how long did that take for something like that to happen? Or what's your experience across the board with this, with different kids?
It's different for every child. Not every child is the same.
Hmm.
And that's why ABA is so great because it's individualized to the learner. It's not how we want to teach them, it's how they
Hmm.
learn. And that's how we have to change the way we teach.
Hmm.
Um, for one kid, it took him like 3 years.
Yeah.
For some kids, it might take longer. For some kids, it might take a little bit less time, but it's all individualized.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's so important for people to think about that
Yeah.
the pace that we go, we don't get to decide
Hmm.
that. All we can do is offer the best treatment possible. We can offer the best plans
Yeah.
possible. And we know no matter what, that's going to change that child's life.
Yeah.
That's going to change the family's life. It's going to
Hmm.
change the community's life.
Yeah.
But how we move along that path, at what pace, that's up to that child,
Yeah.
right? We do everything we can, but it's important for people to hear that this isn't like, I wish it was.
Yeah.
They come in, I don't know if this has ever happened to you, next day, all of a sudden, boom, boom, boom. Doesn't work like that, right? That there's a persistent path.
Yeah.
And you've experienced that. So you have these kids that you're working with, you're working on something, and repetition is also a lot of what we do. We have to practice
Yeah.
it, right?
Hmm.
Not just like over and over again, the exact same thing, within an hour span, but over time and in different ways with different materials and different people. And
Yeah.
We can go on and on, but there is an element of practice that's needed.
Mhm.
So, from your perspective, what do you say to yourself? You go into your jobs for people who are, we're saying, okay, come into this field. We need more people.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're going to have this like prescription or plan as as we think of it, that outlines you got to do this, right? So you're going to sit there and you're going to practice these things. What do you say to yourself? How do you do it that you come in and you're going to practice it one day, you're going to practice the same thing the next day, you might practice the same thing in the afternoon? How do you keep yourself going?
I think I try to vary how I'm running whatever program it is. So if it's hand washing, sometimes I might do it in the kitchen before snack time or in the bathroom after using the bathroom. So we try to like really vary when we're using it and try to make it as natural as possible, I think is really important.
For
Yeah,
sure. Yeah, make it as in the context that the kids are going to experience
exactly.
it, right?
Yeah,
Because then they're more likely to learn it and also use it in the real
yeah,
world.
for sure.
And I'm glad that you brought up hand washing,
Yes.
because this is so one of my passions is really talking about the needs and helping the needs of the kids who have more moderate to profound needs,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
And I'm worried what I see, within the conversation of autism, whether it's within research or whether it's within treatment, that the conversation has really steered towards um, individuals who have more skills, for lack of a better way to think
Yeah.
about it. And that's important. They still have things they need to work on, and there's
Yeah.
conversations about that.
Mhm.
Don't get me wrong. We service some of them,
Yeah.
and we're so happy to do that. And it's
Mhm.
important. There's some complex skills there that sometimes they need to work on, whether it's conversation skills or executive functioning, whatever they might be working on. Super important. That's meaningful to them.
Yeah.
However, we also work with kids, a lot of kids who are on the moderate to more profound needs end.
Yeah.
And it's really important. Sometimes those aren't the stories that you see in Hollywood, or, maybe doesn't capture the best moment on camera or something like that. But those are the kids that really, really need
Yeah.
service.
I
They need treatment. And I'm worried that they're getting lost from the conversation. I know you've worked with a lot of them, you've made a tremendous impact in their life and their family's life. Share some of your experiences working with those kids. What has mattered to them and their families, and what we can do to make a difference in their
yeah.
lives.
Um, I think the first thing is we always do assessments to see where the child is. The assessments are based on what the child's needs are. So whether they're younger ones, we might do like something like a VB map where it's a little bit more language. And then for some of the older ones, we might do more life skills, which
Yeah.
is really, really important. And we also take in cultural differences, the goals of the parents, what they would like for their child, and think about how this child could be independent,
Yes.
whether it means using the bathroom on their own, whether it means showering, eating with a spoon. Like all these different skills are things that maybe we take for granted, but a lot of these kids are not able to do that. And we want to make sure they're able to work on these skills because we want them to be independent at the end of the day, right? We're not going
Absolutely.
to be with them all forever. And we want to prepare them for when they're with their families. If they go out to eat at a restaurant, can they use a spoon to eat something? So,
Can they sit at a restaurant?
exactly. Yeah.
There's so many different, absolutely, all those
Yeah.
skills are so important. And I'm glad you brought up that word, independence,
Hmm.
right? I always say our job is to put ourselves out of a job.
Hmm.
That's day one. That's what we're looking at. I know that's what you look at,
Yeah.
even from that assessment perspective of where are their skills, where are they at, and then where do we go from there,
Yeah.
right? And it's not just about filling in the boxes. This, we've had lots of conversation of whatever assessment that we, okay, we fill, check, check, check. No, it's about what matters, as you mentioned,
Yeah.
to the child, to the family. What are they going to use? Those things are important. They act as a guide for
Yeah.
us, right? We
Hmm.
have different life skills assessments that
Yeah.
we might use. They're fantastic. They give us ideas, but it all needs to be, who is this child? Where are they going? Who's their family? What matters to them,
Yeah.
right? Culturally, traditions, routines, whatever it is,
Hmm.
right? And then getting them to the level of being independent. And I think some people don't realize, I've certainly seen this myself, is that if you don't teach those things explicitly, if you don't give opportunities for those things to be learned, they don't come naturally to many of
Yeah.
the kids we work with.
Hmm.
I have seen 40-year-olds in diapers. Literally, this is a travesty to me. Can't feed themselves. Sleep is another issue, right? All these common things that we see of needs that
Yeah.
come through our center. So these are game changers,
For
right?
sure.
And within that, you talked about the family, right? Being able to
Mhm.
sit at a restaurant or whatever. You've worked with families a lot as well. What are some of the things that you've seen from families' perspectives that's important to keep in mind for their kids?
When they come to our center, it's one to one usually. We're a little bit more hands-on. We're able to do all these things multiple times, but with families, they have other things going on.
Mhm.
They have other children, they have their jobs, they have to prepare dinner, they have a lot of different things, and we want to make it as easy for them to be able to practice these skills. So, helping find the balance where they can practice these skills, but also keeping in mind life happens, right? Yeah.
So you're keeping that in mind. So what
Mhm.
does that mean? What does that look like then
Um,
when you're trying to get a child to learn something or working
so
with
if
families?
we're talking about PECs, I'm just going to go back to that. We might practice it throughout their entire session. For a
Mhm.
family, we might ask maybe at home time, they do it once or twice, just the bare minimum, just so they can start getting used to that at home and then increase it a little bit as they get more familiar with it. It's a little bit more easier. We know like families have a lot going on and we want to make it
Mhm.
easy for them to be able to still practice these skills, but also manage the rest of their lives too. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Hmm.
So important. So, do you have any tips for, let's say, professionals out there, that are learning to work with families? I know you work with
Yeah.
families really well,
Mhm.
something that you've done so well over your career. In terms of how do you get the families on board? What have you thought about when you're working with families? What kind of tips do you keep in mind?
Um, we're working for the betterment of the child. So their families are part of it, and we want to make sure the families are involved. And that means sometimes we have to be a little bit more flexible with the families, whether that means um, making the data collection very simple or not even doing any data, like
Mhm.
just maybe, did I do it? Yes or no, instead of actually taking data like we do at the center. Um, I've also like tried to be available during the weekends when parents are available to do parent coaching. A lot of them work during the week, so they're not available. I think it's really important to be flexible when you're working with families.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Hmm.
So, like, I think that's so important for people to hear
Hmm.
that we have to understand, even though we can do it one way
Yeah.
at our clinics, centers, wherever the kid at home, if you're doing home based therapy, we have to understand that families have so many different things
Hmm.
happening in their lives. And so we have to adjust, we have to be
Oh yeah.
flexible for sure. From the family's perspective, any tips you have for them in terms of what to look for, how treatment works best from their perspective when they're trying to figure out, what should I do for my child? Or, there might be somebody in like rural Ontario right now looking for something that's a best fit for their child. What do you think is important for them to look for?
Um, what is feasible for them? So not every family has time and resources. So coming up with a plan, what's feasible for them. I know you spoke about rural Ontario, and I remember training a family
Hmm.
for toilet training for the kid, and that worked. Um, but just starting gradually, because even a little bit will make a lot of difference. So just starting, and then we can build upon those skills.
That's a
Yeah.
really good advice for
Hmm.
families who might even be feeling a little overwhelmed. There's so many acronyms.
Hmm.
You Google search
Yeah.
like autism therapy or how to help
Yeah.
my child with, I mean, I don't even know what comes up. And I try not to look at it because it's like, for me, it's overwhelming as a
Hmm.
professional
Yeah.
to try to sift through all that. So getting started, something that's evidence based that is likely to be effective, and
Yeah.
being kind to yourself too. It's okay to
Yeah.
take it in steps,
Yeah.
right? And we've had kids too that we've worked with who maybe because of the landscape that we're in right now, they can't get the most amount of treatment that's the ideal
Yeah.
for that child.
Hmm.
Not every child needs comprehensive or intensive behavioral services, 20 or more hours. Some do, but
Yeah.
not all of them.
Mhm.
And, some, they might need that, but they can't afford
Yeah.
it. Funding is not in place for their family, and so they do what they can,
Yeah.
right? And we've had kids like that,
Mhm.
and that will start with anything. Any experiences that you have to share where it's like, hey, the child starts with what they can,
Yeah.
family starts, and kids can grow that
Yeah.
way too. Any experiences that you've had like that?
Um, lots. But one of the things that I actually learned from you, Nancy, is even just a little bit will like just stretch it. Like all the funding you have, just stretch it so you
Good.
can use it for a longer period of time, but you're still accessing services, whether it's once every week rather than 4 times a week.
Mhm.
Even that makes a difference. So accessing service is important, and even just a little amount makes a difference.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Start somewhere.
Yeah,
Like you said, get
exactly.
started.
Mhm.
And we've seen families who get started with what they can.
Yeah.
And then as resources come into play,
Mhm.
hopefully then they're able to
Yeah.
adjust
Mhm.
and so let's say you have a family who doesn't have as much as we would like them to have under ideal circumstances, right? Of course, we're going to advocate and try to get them
Yes.
that
Mhm.
as best we can. But where do you start with the family? How do you know what to do? So you got 5 different things that you'd like to work on, 10 different things that you'd like to work on. How do you make those decisions?
Again, based on the individual child, their families, their goals, based on the assessment,
Mhm.
partly, we kind of just decide what is the most important for this kid. Um, if it's a kid that's 8 years old and they're not toilet trained,
Mhm.
that is our focus.
Yeah.
If it's for maybe an early learner, maybe we work on communication skills, just depending on where the client is, what their needs are, and the parent's goals as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Prioritize, right?
Mhm.
What's important?
Exactly.
Prioritize,
Yeah.
prioritize. Don't not do
Anything.
anything. Figure out what matters for that
Exactly.
child.
Yeah.
And look, if we can get a kid through toileting
Yeah.
or get a kid requesting things they need and want, that
That's
is
a big.
remarkable.
Yeah.
We've already completely changed their and their families'
For sure.
lives for the good forever.
Yeah.
So it's an important message for people to hear. Because sometimes what I hear is people and I don't blame,
Mhm.
families for this, but they might get stuck on, okay, I need to do this, this is, and then they just don't do
Anything.
anything because it's trying to do
Yeah.
everything, or else I can't, or else it's not going to work.
Yeah.
No, no, you've had experience where, in
Mhm.
fact, kids, start somewhere. Work with families too. You've really engaged the
Yeah.
families because they can extend it outside of
Yeah.
the clinic
Mhm.
into everyday life, which is amazing. Yeah. Any notables with any impacts that you feel at the end of the day you keep in the back of your mind, close to your heart, of times that you've worked with families?
One of them that sticks to my mind is a client that we serviced online
Hmm.
throughout COVID. And this client was not toilet trained, and we worked with the mom to toilet train this child virtually, which is pretty big, I would say. And I got lots of emails from that parent thanking us for everything that we did. And that's one that sticks to my mind. Yeah.
Amazing. So here you are, you're coaching a
Yeah.
parent
Mhm.
on what to do for
Yeah.
toileting. What were some of the things that worked in that situation?
Um, I know the parent wasn't able to take data all the time,
Hmm.
but whatever they were able to do, they were able to like report it in their way. And we
Hmm.
accept it that way. We don't expect them to take data how uh, RBT would take data. We
Hmm.
would accept whatever they send. So they would send me notes and I would analyze the data.
Perfect.
And yeah,
It's still
yeah,
data.
it's still data.
It's still information. And
Yeah.
why that matters for people that might be watching and wondering is because we try to make objective
Decision.
decisions, right,
Yeah.
about a child's learning. It tells us how they're doing, what's working, what's also not working, and then we can move them from there. So you enabled this parent to go ahead
Yeah.
and toilet train their child, even if it wasn't under the perfect
Circumstances.
circumstances, right?
Hmm.
Figured out a way to get
Yeah.
there. And toilet training is one of those things that is a game changer. Like
Yeah.
that's it.
Hmm.
Toilet train, that child's life has changed
Yeah.
forever. Amazing, amazing. Um, so I know you work with the parents, obviously you work with the kids. So here you are, you're moving up, you're working your way through, as you said, right? All of your experiences that include also as you got more, we call them lead roles. Other places might call it prime or whatever, some
Yeah.
assistant supervision. You're learning the ropes, right? And some
Mhm.
of that involves staff training,
Yes.
right? And you mentioned that's a meaningful impact to you too, which it
Oh,
is to me too,
yeah.
because
Mhm.
you teach other people how to do this stuff and it means that our impact can grow as a
Exactly.
field
Yeah.
and do more wonderful things for more kids. So tell me a little bit about some of those staff training experiences that you've had.
Um, Staff training's been good. I think it's really important that staff are trained. We use ABA for that.
Yeah.
We use ABA to train our staff. And when we do train our staff, it's not just their lives that are changing. They're able to work with different clients now with ASD and like expand that knowledge to other clients. So, like you said, it's growing,
Mhm.
right? Um, I have some staff that started as instructor therapists like myself and now are moving into more lead positions. And one of the things that always comes to my mind when I'm training them in more supervisory roles is to think about the functional impact of like whatever we're teaching. So think about the long term. Don't think about like, let's just teach this client this just to teach them something. We want to teach them things that they encounter in their lives. I had a client that started with us learning blueberries, but had never seen blueberries in their
Hmm.
lives. And it just didn't make sense to teach them that. So thinking about what they actually eat, what they encounter in their daily lives. And that's something that I like have passed on to my clinical lead instructor and my assistant clinical lead instructor. And now, like when they're writing targets, I can see it that they think about like the long term effect. They're not just thinking about let's just put a target just to put a target in.
That's so
Yeah.
important
Mhm.
because for some, well, it doesn't matter which child
Yeah.
we're working with, but for some kids, it can take a really long
Yeah.
time to learn a few key skills,
Exactly.
and this time is precious.
Hmm.
So we have to think very carefully. We're really good at teaching a lot of, we can teach a lot of things.
Yeah.
We need to not just think about how to teach, but what are we teaching,
Exactly.
right?
Yeah.
So that's such an
Mhm.
important skill that
Yeah.
you're imparting onto your staff. What about like from more of a, professional development perspective? So like here I am, I'm starting off, and I don't know, Ambreen, this is kind of tough. I mean, we talk about all the successes,
Yeah.
but to be real, there are challenges.
Yeah.
This is a tough job for people. It's incredibly rewarding and meaningful, and I think we're so blessed
Yeah.
to have fallen into this field, but it's tough,
It
right?
is.
On some days,
Yeah.
right? So, what advice do you have for staff, maybe people who might be thinking about this field or some of the staff that you've trained early on? How do you keep them going like you? You've been in the field for
Yeah.
6 years. This is amazing. What would you say to them?
We always go back to why are we in this? Like, why are we doing this? And it all comes back to wanting to make that impact, wanting to make a meaningful impact in clients' lives, making a difference. And a lot of people that we work with at our center are people that want to make a difference, and we just have to remind them why they're there. Because we do have hard days. There are hard
Mhm.
days in our field, but thinking back to why are we doing this is really, really important. And I think just like our clients need reinforcement, our staff need reinforcement too for like everything good that they're doing, whether they realize it or not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they can also celebrate
Yeah,
themselves too. They
exactly.
deserve to,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
We should be celebrating our staff, and we try to as much as we
Mhm.
can every day,
Yeah.
every moment.
Yeah.
And I know the parents do too. I mean,
Yeah.
there's like some beautiful things that I hear from parents, feedback that about the impact that they've made in
Yeah.
their child's life, the staff. I mean, and for staff to hear that yeah, the why,
Yeah.
that's what keeps us
Mhm.
going, right?
The why.
It's the why.
Yeah.
How many people can say they wake up every morning and they know when they get to work, even within the first like 10 minutes of the day, you've made a difference
Yeah.
in a child's life.
Mhm.
So that's amazing to
Yeah.
share that with staff and keep them going. Any days that stick out to you that were a little tough that you had to work through, and how'd you get through it?
We work with kids that exhibit some behaviors that might be aggressive in nature or, as we call them, challenging behaviors.
Mhm.
Um, and I've had clients that have engaged in challenging behaviors, but it's those days that like I reflect on and I'm like, but at the end of the day, we worked through it. We were able to get the kid what he needed, or we were able to support the family in this way, or have them learn a different response for it. So we're not just decreasing challenging behavior, we are teaching them a functional skill, whether it's to say no or to ask for a break. And those are the days that really stick out. Yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, absolutely. To know that if not us, then who's going to help
Yeah,
them,
exactly.
right? They're coming to a treatment
Hmm.
center, they're coming to a clinic for a reason.
Yeah.
And even though it's tough, and it's not to say it's not to
Hmm.
diminish that, it's tough on the child, it's tough on the family, it's tough on staff working through it, but that there's an impact to be made at the end of the day.
Hmm.
How do you help? So now you're in a position where you're not only doing that yourself, but you're also primarily coaching people through this.
Yeah.
Let's start with the staff. We'll talk about the parents too. How do you coach staff to get through all this? What are some of the things that you use to help them?
Um, I like to always debrief with staff whenever there is incidents that
Hmm.
happen. I think that's really important. we're going to have incidents in our field because we do work in this field.
Yeah.
But it's important to remember that like these kids are exhibiting these behaviors because they don't know how to maybe communicate how they're feeling, or they aren't able to express what they want. So it's not intentional, they're not doing it maliciously.
Yeah.
And to remember that, but also for the staff to like debrief and talk about it, because sticking with it too long, they might not want to come to work anymore. It
Mhm.
might cause burnout. I think it's important to talk about it. And then also knowing that there's support. So I always let my staff know, like, I might not jump in right away because I don't want to overstep. But if you do need help, please call for help. We're
Mhm.
always here. Like, there's always a supervisor available. Please call for the supervisor to come in and help. We have walkie talkies for our staff
Mhm.
to use in case they need support. But also, like, not jumping in, I think is really important sometimes. Yeah.
That's a good one because
Hmm.
we want to empower
Yeah.
also each of our staff to be
Yeah.
able to. We have specific intervention, we have
Hmm.
plans,
Yeah.
right, on how to work through this, and a lot of them do include, as you mentioned, I would say all of them include some type of replacement. We're skill building,
Exactly.
right? We're
Yes.
not just trying to say, oh, okay, stop doing that. We don't
Mhm.
even say that to
Yeah.
the kids. We just tell them what we want to
Mhm.
see
Yes.
instead, and we want to empower our staff to be able to work through that.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's good to know that you have people
Yeah.
there when you need them. And this is a hallmark of our
Yeah.
field, is the
Yeah.
supervision,
Yeah.
right? We don't expect people to do this alone.
Yeah.
So for them to know that, that's so good.
Mhm.
And to be able to have the opportunity. And do staff take you up on the debriefing
Yeah.
if you
Some
offer?
some do.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'll just get an email and then
Yeah.
I'll try to reach out to the staff to talk to them in person, but a lot
Yeah.
of them do. Yeah.
That's good. This is the
Yeah.
human side of all the
Mhm.
stuff that we do, right?
Yeah.
How about from the family side? So, because we always say family's part of the team,
Yeah.
right? We don't ever work in isolation with anybody,
Yeah.
really. They're a part
Mhm.
of the family ecosystem, they're a part of the community ecosystem.
Yeah.
So, how do you help families through some of the more challenging behaviors? Some kids may have, some kids may not,
Yeah.
but we do work with some kids that have
Yeah.
profound challenges. How do you help those families?
So obviously we are working on these skills at our center, but a lot of times these kids exhibit more behaviors when they're with their families. There's different control, instructional control when they're home. So offering them the support, offering parent coaching, being flexible when I'm available to support them, whether it's weekends or evenings. Um, and then giving them small strategies. Like I think it's important not to give them a whole intervention plan of what to do, but just small strategies. Ignore the behavior. Don't make eye contact. Don't laugh when you see these
Mhm.
behaviors, because now you're giving attention to those behaviors and you might see an increase in them. Just very small strategies that they can use themselves, but things that they can do.
They can do,
Yeah.
yeah. And we
Mhm.
always say, we're not ignoring the
Yes.
child.
Or
We ignore,
the
like, we're not
behavior.
going to pay attention to the things we don't want to see. We're
Hmm.
going to pay attention to the things we do want to see.
Exactly.
But just even something like that as a tip,
Yeah.
right? As opposed to, like you said, I think it's a good point.
Hmm.
Here's like 3 pages of what to
Yeah.
do. Like, this is
This
just,
doesn't work.
I don't expect to know. I mean, I go to a doctor or surgeon if I needed to
Yeah.
for whatever reason, if I needed help on whatever I
Hmm.
need help with. We have professionals to do, different things for us in our lives.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing with us, right? We shouldn't expect them to be surgeons when they
Exactly.
haven't been trained to be surgeons,
Hmm.
the parents, I mean, right? And so we're there to help give them little tips, right? But I would say we do the heavy lifting.
Yeah.
Essentially, that's
Yes.
why they come to a treatment center. Um, so, have you had success with families in terms of working through some of those challenges? And kids, obviously,
Yes.
we've had success with kids clearly within our clinic, but talk about maybe how that extends to home, maybe even school, other communities. What have you seen in your career?
I worked with a family who had a child that exhibited a lot of challenging behavior. When I first started working with them, we would do online sessions where the mom was present as well as the child, and
Mhm.
I would kind of demonstrate what I would do, and then kind of had mom practice, and it just became routine to mom. And now that kid is at our center and working on social skills. We're not even working on challenging behavior anymore. So
Amazing.
yeah,
And he worked through it with his mom because you were
exactly.
really there
I
coaching
was just
mom,
coaching.
probably, right?
Exactly.
Especially if it's something online.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's incredible that his mom was
Yeah.
able to work through that.
And then even the siblings were able to like be part of those sessions.
Hmm.
It's different when it's at home because the whole family's there.
Yeah.
So not just the parents, but also siblings should be part of like the team, I
Yeah.
guess. Yeah.
It's the family
Hmm.
unit. Absolutely. That's
Yeah.
amazing. Amazing. I always think like, we talk about all this family involvement, but that's not to minimize like how like this is not an easy thing. It's
No.
remarkable what
Yeah.
these families do
I agree.
to be involved because they, as you said, they've got 500 other things going on, right? For a
Mhm.
mom to show up to those sessions
Yeah.
with so many things happening and to work through that stuff is like those are
Yeah.
my hero. Those are the heroes to me. Those are the real
Yeah. I
heroes.
agree.
And that people like you that work with them, you team with them, to make it really work. So you've had profound impact on those families, which is amazing. So that's a really important experience for you to share.
Mhm.
Your training staff, we've talked about training them in chair with kids, celebrating all those successes, working through some of the challenges, being real about those challenges.
Yeah.
Now you're at the point where you're working with staff and teaching them how to work with the families,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
What kind of things are important to you in terms of training staff on parent coaching?
I think technical skills are something that our staff already have, so that's why they're working with parents.
Mhm,
I think it's really important to teach the soft skills. So really listening to what the parent are saying, not trying to interrupt them, but also not trying to give a solution in the moment. I think that's really important. Is sometimes you just need to get gather information before you tell the parent this
mhm.
is what you should do. Like give them a prescription right there. I think it's important to listen. Those are the skills that I like to train on my staff on, as well as being empathetic, being flexible in those moments because the parent might be like, I can't do that. So breaking it down a little bit more.
Mhm.
It might be a smaller thing that we do with the parents than what we do at the center, but involving the parent and allowing them to experience what we're doing and like see how much it's benefiting their child is really important. So having them be part of that success.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Those are all
Mhm.
great
Yeah.
skills because as technicians, which is usually how we start, we
Yeah.
both started like that.
Hmm.
We're really good at knowing, okay, this is the ideal,
Yeah.
right? We can figure
Hmm.
that out. We're pretty
Yeah.
good. I mean, that takes some time
Yeah.
to learn and education and all that kind of stuff. But once you get it, you're like, okay, I can do this is the ideal
Yeah.
program for the
Exactly.
child, right? Great. So now you have a parent who's saying, I don't know if I can, I don't like, or even sometimes subtly, yeah, okay. But then you come back the next week and nothing's done,
Hmm.
right? And so to teach our frontline staff and those that are becoming more senior, right? That, okay, we got a plan and it all sounds nice and it's like, in glossy paper and
Yeah.
everything. But if no one's going to use it, it's useless,
Exactly.
right? So, what are some of the things that you might teach? You said listen,
Yeah.
right? Or not give an answer right away.
Mhm.
What are some of the things that you might teach staff to be attuned to, like if a parent does whatever? And then what do they say? Like, what should they say? What should they do? How do you help work them through some of this stuff where you got to make sure that the parents are going to, try to practice
Yeah.
whatever it is? How do we ensure that it's important?
Sometimes it's just asking what's feasible for the families. What do you think is feasible for you? What do you think you can do?
Mhm.
Is this too much? Do you think this is something you could do? Um, Kind of even just like, do you think you could practice this once with him on every night? How can we support you? Just offering as much support as you can to the parents because it's not easy for them. I think also just being flexible in that moment is okay. I understand it might be a lot. And kind of like being empathetic to them, like really understanding where they're coming from. And if they're not sure of the answer, don't give an answer. You know what? That's not something that I thought about, but maybe I can talk to the supervisor and let you know. Like that's always something that I like to train my staff on. If they don't know the answer, don't give an answer just to give an answer. Yeah.
Yes, this is an important skill. Doesn't matter where you
Yeah.
are in your career,
Yeah.
right? We all
Yeah.
don't have the answers. We want to. We're
Yeah.
really good problem
Yeah.
solvers, good teachers, good but sometimes if we're not sure,
Yeah.
this is a humble experience to be able to say, that's an important
Yeah.
question. We want to get you an answer, but I need to, do a little bit more research or I need to figure out the best path
Yeah.
for your child. So these
Hmm.
are all
Yeah.
key things that as a field, if we do even more of
Yeah.
this, we can make a bigger impact in families' lives, which
I
is
agree.
amazing. And from the family side, looking for those things,
Yeah.
right? And
Mhm.
providers is looking for that partnership.
Yeah.
That's super, super important.
Yeah.
So, you've worked with so many different kids and so many different staff. Um, any stories that stick out for you in terms of high impact? Like these are moments for you that you're like, okay, this was a key moment in my career, and that's why I'm still here after 6 years.
Trying to think. I have lots. I
Lots.
can't pick
Okay,
one.
yeah,
There's just
that's
too
okay. You
many.
don't need to pick one.
Um,
Anything that comes to your mind that
I
you
think when it comes to staff, I've seen a lot of my staff grow in the field. I know when they first came into the field, they were like me. They didn't know what
Mhm,
ABA was. They didn't know how what the interventions were. And fast forward 6 years now, I have a clinical lead instructor that I trained when she was an instructor, and she's now training other people, which
mhm.
she's making a difference now with um, spreading the word of ABA even further. So I think
Yeah.
that's really important. In terms of a client, the one that I can think about is shoe tying. I had a client a little bit older, didn't know how to tie his shoes, but loved to play basketball and wanted to wear all these cool basketball shoes,
Yeah.
like all kids do. And we taught him how to tie his shoes, and he was able to get a new pair of like basketball shoes. So I
I
think that
mean,
one
how
sticks out
cool
to
is
me.
that,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. And that's also another way to feel good about
Yeah.
yourself, right? Do things that you are into,
Hmm.
but also find your little tribe of
Yeah.
friends,
Yeah.
right? That you can hang out with.
Hmm.
It's amazing that you talk so much about like self care and what we
Yeah.
call like adaptive
Hmm.
skills and the social. I mean, they all fall under adaptive skills,
Yeah.
activities of daily living, that those are your high impact moments.
Yeah.
Why do you think that is? Why is that like what, because you do so many wonderful things and I've seen so many things that you've worked with kids on. Those particular moments really stick out to you. Why is that?
Because it makes a huge difference in the client's life. It's like a game changer, like you said. For them to learn how to tie their shoes, they don't have to depend on their sisters to tie their
Mm.
shoes. They're able to do it now independently. I think independence is what I want for our clients. I want them to be able to live their lives independently as much as they can. And I think that's why those moments stick out to me. Like, it's nice seeing them do things by themselves that we've taught them. Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah, it's that job putting ourselves out of a job,
Yeah.
right?
Hmm.
And to know this is really what the focus of what we do. So
Yeah.
we can look at all those again, all those assessments and check, 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 box, box, box. But it doesn't mean anything
Yeah.
unless we're actually, you know, um, doing something that's useful, meaningful for that child who's
Exactly.
going to become that youth, who's going to become that adult. Like we have that window into the future, right?
Hmm.
That sometimes families don't always
Yeah.
have. And need to think about that,
Yeah.
right? So, you have all these things that keep you going. You're training your staff to keep going and do things really well and engage with families, and all of this is super important. At the same time, now you've moved up a path in terms of certification, which
Yes.
is also really important too.
Hmm.
So, tell me a little bit about that, where you started with that, how you got to where you are today, which is a BCBA or BCABA, sorry. And for those that don't know, that's a board certified assistant behavior analyst, which I think is a wonderful position for our field. Anyone like yourself, if I'm a big proponent of BCABAs because it helps more children at the end of the day and more
Yeah.
families. So, how did you get to that from going from where you started, which is in data entry
Yeah.
and tutoring, and like don't even know that this is like a field that exists, and now you're certified and continuing to make a huge impact.
When I first started at Breakthrough as an instructor therapist, I didn't know anything about ABA, and I came into the field not knowing what it meant.
Hmm.
I started working with clients, and I realized this is what I wanted to do forever. Like, this is what I want to do. Um, so I got my RBT very shortly after starting at Breakthrough. Um, and
And the
then
RBT is?
the Registered Behavior Technician
Yes, yeah, that's
certification.
important. Yeah.
Um,
Which is like the front line level
yeah.
certification, very important to have. Yep.
And it was really good because that was like putting theory behind what we were practicing at the
Hmm.
center. And it really made things make sense. Like, why are we doing things a certain way? And I've always had a passion to learn and grow. So obviously, when the opportunity arose, I took it to become an assistant clinical lead instructor. And with that role, um, I decided I wanted to get my certification as a BCABA, which I did. It was
Yay.
hard work, but
Yeah.
we did it.
Yeah.
Um, and through that, like, it was really good because I was able to learn a lot about like supervision, about targets, about just the supervisor's perspective of like providing ABA services. And now I'm able to put that into practice.
Amazing.
I also think my supervisors, including yourself, Nancy, had a really big impact on me. I saw what they did and I'm like, I want to be able to do that too. So, yeah.
Wonderful.
Mhm.
So, for people to appreciate this involves supervised field work. So, you got
Yes.
to have time in the field doing all of these duties
Yeah.
under supervision, having meetings, talking through it, thinking about each client's need, all the
Yeah.
stuff we talked about. There's also an exam that you have to
Mhm.
study for and write,
Yeah.
coursework that needs to be taken before the exam. So, there's like all these different pieces that
Yeah.
leads up to these letters, right? And we can get a little technical about it, but at the end of the day, what does it mean to you to have this, to say, I'm a BCABA? What does that mean to Ambreen?
Obviously, I'm very proud of my accomplishments in the field because this was not something that I would have thought about 6 years ago. And having that certification means I'm able to help more kids.
Yeah,
Yeah. Help more
absolutely.
families. Yeah.
Amazing. And have that tremendous
Yeah.
impact. So, we started this conversation by saying, look, we have this like major need in our field. There's growing
Yeah.
demand for our services, which is good
Yeah.
because it means we can help children, their families, youth, adults, whomever people are working with, make a major difference in their lives and their families' lives. So people are aware of this now,
Yeah.
right? And they know like there's hope, right? We work in the autism community. ABA goes beyond the autism community. Talk about autism. Kids have a diagnosis, and families sometimes wonder, like, what does this mean? And I can only imagine I've had these
Yeah.
conversations with some
Hmm.
of them. Um, but at the end of the day, we say, okay, that's just a starting point, right?
Yeah.
There's all these wonderful things we talked about that you can
Hmm.
learn. And but yet we don't have enough people doing it. You are, case in point for someone who started in, got the bug, knew it, like, this is amazing. This makes a difference. I want to keep doing this, and you've kept doing it. Not only have you kept doing it, but you've,
Hmm.
expanded your impact by helping other people. So what's your advice to people who may be thinking, maybe I want to, I'm not sure. I kind of want to do something great with my life and maybe work with kids or youth or make a difference. What would you say to them about what you do or why they should, you know, think about what we do?
ABA is amazing and it makes such a big difference in people's lives, not just clients, not just staff, but also their families. And a lot of these people need our help and support. So I think if this is something that you're thinking about and you want to help people, this is the field for you. You have to just take the dive and just do it. Yeah.
Amazing. And for any parents out there that might be wondering, I have a child who's not toilet trained or having trouble feeding themselves or whatever it might be, they're on the spectrum and they have
Yeah.
needs, what would you say to them?
Start services. No matter how many little hours you start with, just start services because you will see the impact of ABA.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing your story, your experiences, inspiring people
Thanks.
to do the wonderful work that you do and help kids with autism. It was so great to talk to you. And thank you for all the work you do.
Thank you
You
for
really
having
do make
me.
a difference every day with all the kids that you work with and the families.
Thanks, Nancy. So do you.
Thank you.
Team effort.
Team effort,
Yeah.
absolutely.
There's only so much we could cover in the short amount of time we had today. If you found value in what we talked about, go to breakthroughautism.ca, join our newsletter, and also follow me on my socials.